Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me for this piece discussion video. Today the focus is on the piece Trying Windows 005, which is the 6th iteration in the ongoing Windows series. Windows itself is a series within the postmodern body of work, and Windows is a series that contemplates the ways in which humanity is distorted, miscommunicated, and diluted when translated through interfaces, and the emotional ramifications upon those who are involved in this exchange. This is also a series wherein I actively work through my own emotional challenges and adversities that are occurring contemporaneous within my own life while I'm working on these iterations. For a more in-depth look at the series, you will find a link to the series overview in the description of this video. I want to start the discussion first by looking at the piece's title, beginning with that verb, trying. It is obviously in an active sense, and it is a continuous verb. It's trying to denote that idea of an ongoing operation, and it's unspecified as to who is speaking. I wanted the ambiguity to suggest a bit of reticence on part of the speaker, that the speaker is not attributing a pronoun, a subject pronoun, to that verb because of some hesitance or some reticence. The comma is meant to suggest a gentle wait that is supposed to elicit a subtle pause. That's why the piece properly is Trying Windows 005, because there is that very specific sort of break between the two. It is again meant to emphasize just the weight of the action, that this is ongoing, that this is continuous, and therefore has more gravitas. Regarding the emotions swirling within this piece and the personal connections I have, it all sort of centers around this idea of the presentational aspect of social media. This has been a long-standing place of personal discomfort for me in my relationship to social media. I've often felt that it is a chasm, sort of an empty chasm, and before it I am helpless. There's this idea of it being a vain effort, something that I have to do, and yet something that never really amounts, or is always sort of paltry, or is throwing kind of, pennies down the hallway to try to get as much noise made as possible. There's also that idea of it being sort of just an empty show of pomp. I found that being an artist and putting my work online, especially through social media, it's very vulnerable, and it's before a sea of onlookers, and yet ironically, it is me sharing something so intimate and personal in an arena that is very unpersonal, that is very cold, that is very sterile. The title of this piece also makes direct reference to a song. The song is This Is Me Trying by Taylor Swift from her album Folklore, released in 2020. I developed a connection between the song's emotional weight and my own experience. As I was saying, it really has to do with being an artist, and especially one who shares very personal and intimate work online before the masses. It sort of feels deeply exposing, and the more sincere I am in my effort, the more uncomfortable that is. That is what I really connected with Taylor's song. I felt that within the emotions of the song, and I felt that with that same sense of weight. With that in mind, I want to turn now to the composition and the color palette. The main sort of view that I have with this piece is it's meant to elicit the idea of a stage or a television screen, that the figure is set on display. It's this idea, again, seated before the sea of blasé onlookers. The figure is visibly concerned, she's unsure, she's in this state of flux. I was trying to create a triangular composition that continuously draws the viewer's eye back to her expression, that she sits at the apex of this piece. On her left, the word don't is meant to be sort of a mockery, and it's those perceived voices trying to dissuade her from attempting. Those are the onlookers. Those are sort of the ones that have a problem, the ones that want to dissuade her, the ones that want to sort of mock her. Then the idea of mute on her right side with the asterisk is meant to be this idea of speechlessness, that it's an uncomfortable suspension, and that she's held in this moment. She's thrust into this position, returning to the idea of vulnerable, of helpless, those ideas really trying to become an active part of the composition. Below the figure is that tight, clenched grip, and this idea that she split at her midsection, and that this is sort of like a remnant of her from below. Her upper torso lacks those hands, it lacks that control, and instead we have this gripping below. It's this idea of holding on in spite of the insecurity, but almost to the point of trembling. It has to do with the emotional pitfalls of insecurity and self-consciousness that I experience deeply and that are really exacerbated by that online presence, by that social media atmosphere that I was discussing. The dashed lines and forms that travel up her through this composition is meant to create an idea of deep anticipation. It's sort of trying to build a sense of electricity to all of this tension around her. With the color palette, the henna red and the pumpkin orange are meant to embody this sense of heat, that heat of the spotlight, that heat of being gazed upon, or that uncomfortable sort of warmth that one gets in the cheeks when you're feeling exposed or embarrassed. And then the sandbar brown and the sepia are meant to add these sort of grimy shadows, that there's something sinister lurking here. And ultimately, I wanted it to sort of culminate in this sort of burning. Again, returning to the ideas of anticipation, returning to the ideas of tension as well. Regarding the placement of this piece and its impact for the series, this was a forerunner within the first major progression. Obviously, it is the sixth piece, so it is certainly early on in the work. It was one of the first produced in the progression that I created in the summer of 2021. And I was motivated at this time by the prospect of exhibiting a new group of pieces as part of a two-person show that fall. And so I was earnestly working on these new pieces in the Windows series. And yet it was a very uncertain affair. I was afraid, and very much so. I kept having these feelings of being an underdog, that I had to show up, that I had to, really come through for this exhibition. Ultimately, I didn't end up going through with that exhibition because the exhibition itself didn't go off, and so I was sort of left with my hands tied halfway through the production cycle of these pieces. Thankfully, ended up, of course, finishing them, which was a true gift. But I was still, that same summer, because of this opportunity, I also began to commit to the work more fully and to do the work more full time. It was a major turning point in my life. This was, again, all summer 2021. And so social media was becoming more necessary feeling. This piece is very much born out of those circumstances, those very real and uncomfortable circumstances. And so because of that, this piece, trying Windows 005, it really sets a precedent for my exploration of the very personal theme within the whole Windows series of sort of being put before the tribunal. This idea that many following iterations would explore more deeply, but it's essentially setting the stage, and quite literally, for this concept of being placed before the masses, of being really sort of stuck in a place that is uncomfortable yet necessary, and feeling as though what I have to share, this very intimate and personal work, is not properly valued because of the space in which it's being shown. I think I will stop there for today. Thank you so much for joining me for this discussion, and I do hope you'll share it with anybody else who might find it worthwhile. Thank you again, and until the next one, take care.